The advisor to the president of Ukraine, Oleksiy Arestovych, mentioned that he thinks that the real hell will begin in June or July of this year. He did not specify whether this hell is going to be for Russians or Ukrainians, but according to recent news and war developments, I think that this will be the turning point for the Ukrainian forces. What does all this mean? How Ukraine can win this war? And what are the approximate timelines? These are all the questions that we'll be talking about in my today's video. What's up, investors and people of Reddit, it's the Russian Dude, and this is your daily update on Russian-Ukrainian war as of Thursday, April 28th. You can see the main events of the day to my right, along with the timestamps. Today, the advisor to the president of Ukraine, Oleksiy Arestovych, mentioned that the real hell of this war will start in June-July of this year. What he probably meant by that is that during these 2 months, the most intense combats will happen. This also probably means that the direction of this war will most likely change. And in my personal opinion, I think what it means is that Ukraine will start launching its massive counterattacks against Russia. And so here are just a few obvious reasons why he specifically selected these 2 months. So the main reason behind this statement is that at this very moment Ukraine only started receiving offensive weapons. So which basically means that all the previous months Ukraine was basically just defending itself. Right now is the period of accumulation of offensive weapons, which later Ukraine will be obviously using to push away Russians away from its territory. So even though Ukraine has right now offensive weapons, it is still not enough. For example, at this very picture we can see just some of the few heavy weapons that Ukraine already has. And among them are M142 high mobility artillery rocket systems presented to Ukraine by the United States of America. Their biggest advantage is that they can launch missiles up to 500 kilometers radius, which is going to be crucial for Ukraine because at this very moment the second furthest missile artillery system that they have has 10 times shorter distance. And by the way, if you want to see more details which weapons Ukraine has at this very moment, feel free to pause the video. Besides that, the Secretary of State Antony Blinken also mentioned today that Ukraine must decide for itself whether they want to counterattack Russia and have fights on the territory of Russia, which basically means that the US indirectly approves military actions on the territory of Russia. And this is not the first country which approved the action, because if you remember, yesterday the Ministry of Defense of the United Kingdom also mentioned that in case Ukraine wants to fight on the territory of Russia, they will have no problem with this. Besides that, just now the US approved Lend-Lease program for Ukraine. And briefly, Lend-Lease is this kind of program which allows to send weapons and artillery and vehicles to another country, avoiding many bureaucratic barricades, which in very basic terms means that sending weapons to Ukraine now became much faster. It is also worth mentioning that the last time the US engaged in Lend-Lease program was during Second World War, and it also means that all this military equipment, vehicles and weapons can be just leased. So it means that Ukraine does not have to buy them, which obviously reduces dramatically the cost for Ukraine, which at this point needs money. And by the way, if you like this style of daily news reporting, feel free to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also, please check the link in the description if you want to support Ukraine with us. I will be donating all of my Patreon memberships at the end of each month to Ukraine, and I'll do it during my charitable livestream, which will happen in 2 days, this Saturday, April 30th. Today there were 3 missile strikes against defense factory called Artyom inside Kyiv. And just as a reminder, a couple of days ago Russia was mentioning in case Ukraine will be threatening and even using weapons on the territory of Russia, the response of Russia will be immediate. And it means that this includes missile strikes against decision-making cities, such as for example Kyiv. In response to that, Ukraine said in case there are missile strikes against Kyiv, Ukraine will respond by bombing Moscow. And so just a couple of hours ago today, Russia was indeed bombing Kyiv. Like mentioned previously, this was the defense factory, so it kinda qualifies as the military object. So as for now, we can just wait and see the response of Ukraine. Today, the bill in the US was approved, which allows seized and frozen Russian assets to be used for post-war reconstruction of Ukraine. This means that all these assets, which used to be owned by Russians, especially the ones which are acquired because of support by the government, these assets can be seized, sold, and then all this money will go towards humanitarian and military support of Ukraine. Besides that, this money will go towards post-war reconstruction of Ukraine, as as well as supporting Ukrainian refugees now and later. And I guess you've probably seen all these ultra yachts of Russian oligarchs that were seized, which value is estimated to be in hundreds of millions of euros and dollars. Some of these yachts were estimated to be worth the annual budgets of some of the regions in Russia. So as a result, ironically, we might have Russia to be one of the biggest sponsors of Ukrainian post-war reconstruction. Besides the US, Canada is also thinking about using frozen and seized assets of Russian people in the help of reconstruction of Ukraine. The president of Belarus, Oleksiy Arestovych, says that he is thinking about resurrecting the USSR along with Putin. And I mean, in case this happens, at this very moment, there are only two countries which will be part of this new USSR. But he also said that there will be both looking for more countries, allies, who will be joining this new USSR. And I mean, I don't know if these countries will be joining Soviet Union point two willingly, or there will be some kind of liberation and referendum before this. Besides that, this will be a perfect opportunity for all these people who are missing Soviet days and they are saying, oh, I wish I can be back in the USSR for at least one more day. And believe me, there are people like this in Russia. I wonder what their new reaction will be when they see this new Soviet era. Because, you know, people get used to good things very quickly. And it was not that many good things about the USSR. Yesterday, Lugansk and Donetsk regions announced that they are planning to do referendums next month about joining Russia. Besides that, there was also supposed to be a referendum in Kherson region about becoming independent from Ukraine. And today, let's call him the infiltrator of Russia inside Kherson region, Kirill Stremausov, mentioned that Kherson is not planning yet to do any kinds of referendums. He then also added that the region is not planning to come back to Ukraine as well, which basically means, I guess, that the main reason why he is saying this is just not to make it look as obvious. What I think is gonna happen, they're gonna say, no, we're not gonna do any referendums. Couple of months later, they will do the referendum about being independent from Ukraine, and then couple of months more, they will do again a referendum about joining Russia. That's just my wild assumption. In response to that, the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, said that Ukraine will not recognize any referendums. Several days ago, a new territory has started to being dragged into this war. What I'm talking about here is obviously the country of Moldova and the region of Pridnestrovye. Just the very basic difference between these two regions is the following. Moldova is basically Moldova, and Pridnestrovye is this independent republic which doesn't want to be a part of Moldova. The reason why they separated back in 1990s, it is because Moldova did not want to acknowledge Russian as the main official language. So Pridnestrovye, which had dominant population of Russians at that time, and I guess at this point as well, didn't like it, and they just basically wanted to separate. This is approximately the same idea as Donbas region and Ukraine. Donbas region, which includes Donetsk and Lugansk, is basically Pridnestrovye, and they want to separate from a bigger country, Ukraine versus Moldova in this case, and the reason for this separation it is because allegedly they do not like each other. So several days ago there was some explosions in Pridnestrovye, and it is still uncertain whether these were Ukrainians or Russians. But the main idea behind this provocation is basically to show that Pridnestrovye is being targeted. And of course, Russia immediately said that in case it is needed, they will support Pridnestrovye. And at the same time, Ukraine said that in case Moldova asks us for help, we will come for its help. And so, even though there are no official combat actions at this very moment in that region, several days ago a document was found which was saying about the mobilization of men in Pridnestrovye region. At this very moment, the mobilization is voluntarily and they are promised approximately $170. This mobilization is just for training, which was supposed to last no more than 90 days. It all might sound like, okay, this might be just a routine mobilization, but this is approximately exactly how this Russian-Ukrainian war started back in February of this year. In this map presented to us by the Ministry of Defense of the United Kingdom, we can see the current condition of the war. And as you can see, the main military action is concentrated in the east of the country as well as in the south of the country. The main advancement of the Russian forces is now happening in the region of the city of Izum, which we can see right here in the northeast of the country. And the reason why Russian forces are concentrating in this region and trying to advance as much as possible is to complete their surrounding of Donbas region, which according to them is the main purpose of the second stage of this war. And if you want to see more details, feel free to pause the video. If some of you might remember, a couple of days ago there was an alleged assassination attempt against the main propagandist of Russia, Vladimir Solovyev. So this assassination attempt was stopped by the Federal Security Service of Russia, and this detainment was basically perfect. The alleged Nazis were not showing any signs of resist. They acknowledged every scenes that were implemented. And all these Ukrainian Nazis who are speaking perfect Russian, they were writing in Russian, they had Adolf Hitler books and all these swastikas all over the floor, just like you would imagine them if you see a movie. So some people started thinking that this probable assassination attempt was basically just a warning against Vladimir Solovyev. And this warning came from no one else other than Putin himself. And I mean, why would Putin want to eliminate his main propagandist? So the history goes back approximately like a couple of weeks ago when this Russian Navy flagship called Moskva was sunk by Ukrainians. And in his next TV show, Vladimir Solovyev, the propagandist, was asking rhetorical questions, which were basically like why the anti-aircraft missile defense systems were not working properly. Which might sound like a reasonable question, but not whenever you're number one propagandist of the country. In this case, you cannot show any signs of doubt in the superiority of your army. And this is allegedly what Vladimir Putin didn't like. So some people assumed that Putin was like, okay, let's make it look like there was to be assassination attempt against this Vladimir Solovyev. Let's leave him so scared that he will never ever doubt the power of Russia. And because who knows, maybe this did work, because after this episode, Vladimir Solovyev never ever again doubted his words. What's even more, in his most recent episode, the propagandist number 2, Margarita Simonyan, said that Russia must prepare for using nuclear strikes against other countries. And the main reason she gave us why would Russia want to use nukes, it is because in case Russia fails in this so-called special military operation. Her almost exact quote was the following: in the slightest chance, in case Russia will not be able to achieve its main goal of this special military operation, we should just nuke everyone. She then added, if we cannot win, no one can win. And then Vladimir Solovyev goes like, that's okay, because we will go to heaven and they will just die. This was just to show you the state of propaganda in Russia at this very moment. Thank you so much for your attention, stay safe and see you tomorrow.